Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video for the channel. Welcome to a different type of video. Okay, this is a different type of video today. I decided to do a tier list. Now, the reason why I wanted to do a tier list instead of your regular video, it's because I think that old format in which I just rank albums and, from worst to best is kind of old right now. I think that a tier list is better because it's more specific, because often the fact that you put an album on top of another doesn't really mean that you think it's all that better. Sometimes it's just like a few more things about it. A lot of people, like when I did the Coldplay ranking, the previous one, I think that a lot of people seem to believe that only because I put a certain album at number 5, let's say, I thought the album was bad or something, and that's not the case at all. That's why I think that this is way better to put my opinion on a certain artist's discography out there. That's the reason why today's discography is going to be Coldplay's discography, because it's one of the ones I'm more familiar with. I do know quite a lot about this album. I do listen to this album on a daily basis, so yeah, I thought it was a good idea to start with Coldplay. That's the reason why you have this beautiful display on the left side of the screen. I don't know if I'm too close. I don't know how I'm gonna fit the thing here to my left. Now, we're gonna do this in chronological order, so we'll start off with Parachutes, okay? I do believe that Parachutes is a solid album. I do like the album a lot. I do listen to the album quite a lot, but I really don't think it's the best of the best Coldplay can offer. Honestly, I think that this album can be boring sometimes because of how simple the songs are. And not simple in terms of not simple because of the fact that they're acoustic tracks. Simple because sometimes, the songwriting in this album, it's a little bit flat. I do enjoy Chris Martin's performance in this album a lot. I do think that the way he uses falsetto in most of these tracks is really beautiful. For example, in the tracks Spies, which also has a really cool guitar riff in the chorus. I do like tracks like Sparks. We Never Change is a beautiful track. The hidden track, Life is for Living, is also really good. But my problem with this album comes in the form of the most popular tracks like Yellow, Trouble, Shiver, so on and so forth, because I think that even though they're great tracks, Yellow is one of the most nostalgic songs of my childhood. I was born in 2001, so I grew up with this song basically, and when I was a kid, this song used to be playing in every single fucking place I went to. So yes, I do have a lot of love for the song, but I don't think it fits well enough in this album. This album is mostly acoustic and it's mostly really minimalistic, so these tracks are basically just alternative rock songs. I don't think they fit in the album. I do think that tracks like Shiver and Trouble were more added because, they knew they were going to be popular and they knew that, they had a hit potential. But I think they sacrificed a lot of the album's essence put in those tracks, and I definitely think that a more acoustic version of Yellow would have been better for the album, and releasing the actual track as a single but putting a more acoustic and stripped down version of the song, maybe it would have been better. But still, I think that even the songwriting, the way they wrote the song, it's totally different, or feels totally different from the rest of the album. That's why I'm not going to put this in the S category, definitely. I don't know if I'm going to put it in the A again. I do feel this album can be a little bit boring, but honestly, I just feel like it's more of a B album, but that seems kind of low to me. I don't know. I'm kind of having trouble right now. For now, I'm just going to put Parachutes in the A category, and then if I feel like I need to take it down once we, look at other albums, then I will. But for the moment, it stays in the A category. It's a really good album. It has a lot of good songs. Actually, I don't think there's a track in Parachutes that I don't like. I do think they ripped off a lot of Radiohead style in the 90s in songs like High Speed, and even songs like Spies. That falsetto sometimes feels a little bit too Thumb York. But apart from that, I do think they're good tracks. High Speed is a really decent track. So yeah, I like it a lot. Now we go with The Rush of Blood to the Head. Now, honestly, this should be the example. If any artist wants to see how someone can evolve in terms of music, they definitely should see the difference between Parachutes and A Rush of Blood to the Head. It's a completely different album. It's completely different, in its songwriting style. Now it's way more interesting, way more Coldplay. Even the acoustic tracks in this album, like Green Eyes, feel so much more complete and so much more fulfilled that's one of the main reasons why I love this album so much. I just think that every single song here feels complete. Feels like you can't add anything to the track to make it better. From the opening track, where, you know, those drums come in as a thunderstorm and politics are so amazing. Also, the concepts that they were touching in this albums were way more interesting too. Obviously, you do have a lot of the hits from this album, like The Scientist, which is an amazing song, one of my favorite tracks. You also have Clocks, which, you know, is a really iconic track. You also have In My Place, you have Warning Sign as the most popular tracks from the album. They're really solid tracks, but I think that, you know, the amazingness behind A Rush of Blood to the Head comes in the form of tracks like Daylight, like A Whisper, like the title track, A Rush of Blood to the Head, because they're so interesting and they show a style of songwriting that Chris Martin kind of developed and evolved into Viva la Vida. If you listen to a song like A Whisper, you can tell that it sounds a lot like Viva la Vida. The same thing with Daylight. I just think that, you know, this album was like the footprint for Coldplay's style. While Parachutes only serves as an introduction to the band, this serves as, you know, the footprint of the band, what you're supposed to understand as Coldplay, and that's the reason why I love this album so much. And it's going straight to the S tier, I'm gonna be honest. It just goes straight to the S tier, no questions asked. This album is fucking amazing. Alright, moving on now, let's go with X and Y. Now, a lot of the things that I'll say about X and Y in this video may be offensive by a lot of you, but I stick to everything I've said about this album so far in my channel. I do think this album is kind of flat, kind of boring, kind of not that interesting. And the reason why is because I feel like this is like the wrong idea. I think Coldplay was trying to evolve past A Rush of Blood to the Head. And since it's kind of like they said to each other, hey, A Rush of Blood to the Head had more rock than Parachutes. Therefore, if we want to evolve even further, we have to add even more rock music. And I just don't think that was a good idea, because it's pretty much all it has. You know, it's not that interesting. It doesn't have that piano, that bass, you know, those bass lines that were so interesting in A Rush of Blood to the Head. I just don't feel the same level of creativity when it comes to these tracks. I feel like a lot of them follow the same type of formula. I just think this is, you know, the ugly version of A Rush of Blood to the Head. I also think this album has no sort of like importance in the band's discography. Like, again, I feel like Viva la Vida was the evolution from A Rush of Blood to the Head. X and Y doesn't really do anything for the band's creativity and songwriting process. I do know that this was a really popular album, and tracks like Fix You, The Hardest Part, Speed of Sound were really popular and brought the band to a bigger audience. I get that 100%, but that doesn't really make it any better for me. Like, maybe if we're talking about the album's importance for the band's popularity, then I would put this album higher, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the quality of the album's songs. And yes, you have a lot of solid tracks. I do like The Hardest Part. Twisted Logic is fucking amazing. Fix You is a good song. Speed of Sound is a good song. I don't really think that album is that bad, but it's definitely not good. Or I don't think it's that good. I just feel like a lot of the times I'd rather listening to the songs in this album separately rather than, you know, listening to the whole thing. And that's never a good sign if we're talking about, you know, the quality of an album. That's the reason why I'm not going to put it that high. I'm not going to put it so low, but it's definitely, you know, an album that it's between good and bad. So that, you know, that's C. I'm going to put it in the C category. If you disagree, go ahead and leave a comment, okay? Don't give me shit for not putting it higher. You put it higher on your own list. Okay, now let's go with Viva la Vida. If you've seen my previous rankings, when it comes to Coldplay, I do put Viva la Vida way higher than, at the top of my list, basically. I put Viva la Vida at the top of my list. Do I feel the same way? Yes, I do think this album is amazing, but I don't feel so confident when I'm talking about this album anymore. I don't know if it's for the fact that I've listened to so much more music since then, and now I have, like, bigger standards for when it comes to a 10 or a perfect album, or if it's because I feel like this album wasted a lot of potential. Like, if you listen to the B-sides or the B-sides project that it's Prospects March, You can tell that a lot of the songs like Rainy Day, Glass of Water, the title track, those songs are really good, and they were wasted, you know, they were not included in the album for no reason at all. Still, the album has a lot of solid tracks, and it is a really good listen. For example, you have the track Lost, which is one of my favorite from the record. You have Viva la Vida, which is a song I'm pretty sure everyone knows is one of the greatest tracks, or one of the most popular tracks ever. You also have the track Violet Hill, which I think it's one of the heaviest and hard-hitting tracks that Coldplay has ever done. You also have the wonderful Strawberry Swing, which I've said many times, but I'm going to say it again. It's my favorite Coldplay song ever. I think it's beautiful. It's perfect. It's just a perfect track. What else can I say? Lovers in Japan is a really good track. Rain of Love, which is a hidden track inside Lovers in Japan. It's really good too. It's really beautiful. Yes is also a really interesting track. Those violins in that track are so good, and you know, paint a picture that's so vivid and clear. I just love how this album portrays war and how it feels, you know, how you actually feel the, you know, what the lyrics are describing, thanks to the music being as good. So for that reason, this album definitely goes in the S row, so I'm gonna put it right over there. This album is amazing. Everyone should check this album out. I know a lot of people seem to be under the thought that this album only has Viva la Vida and that's the only worthy track in this record. That's fucking stupid. Okay, listen to this whole album because it has a lot of great tracks. Now let's go with Mylo Xyloto. Okay, this is a really interesting album. I just don't really know how to feel about this one, honestly. You have tracks that I really do enjoy. For example, Charlie Brown, Paradise. But right next to each good track this album offers, you often have a really boring or just overdone track that you just don't really feel like it. For example, Every Teardrop Up is a Waterfall. It's really not. It's just way too positive, and I know that it sounds stupid, but it just feels like a really bad Disney Channel song. I don't like it. The synths are nice, you know, I don't have a problem with the production on the track, but the way that Chris Martin's voice sounds in that track, it's really bad. And also, tracks like UFO, tracks like, Up With The Birds, the closing track, started this sort of trend where Coldplay only spoke about, you know, birds and the universe and positivity and this sort of bullshit that was so obviously forced and exaggerated in most of their albums. That's the reason why I don't really like Mylo Xyloto that much. I think the album started a trend where the band was growing more and more mediocre with each album after this one. And, you know, the next album on the list is definitely gonna, provide evidence to that fact. But yeah, I do like a handful of the tracks in this album. I can say that 50% of this album is really good, but the other 50%, it's not really that good. So while I know that a lot of you love this album, and while I know that a lot of you may think this album is better than what it actually is, in my opinion, I think this album is not that good. So I'm just gonna put this album in the C row too. I just don't fuck with it that much. Honestly, like looking at this right now, I think that if I'm going to put Mylo Xyloto at number at a C, I definitely have to put X and Y at a B, because I do think that X and Y is better. Because even though I do think it's flat and that, you know, the best tracks from Mylo Xyloto are better than the best tracks from X and Y, I think that the overall listen is more enjoyable when it comes to X and Y. So, I don't know. I kind of want to put this album at B. I'm going to put this album at B. X and Y moves to the B spot right now. Alright, now let's go with Ghost Stories, and this is where it gets ugly. Before I say anything about this album, let me just say, I do know that this album was released and crafted in the midst of Chris Martin's divorce. And I do know that this album is like a heartbreak letter, and I do know that there was a lot of feelings put into this album, and that a lot of the things said in this album come from Chris Martin's own experience during his divorce. With that being said, I don't really think that that's enough reason to justify the fact that a lot of the songs here are underproduced and underwritten. If you compare the quality of the tracks when it comes to production, not in terms of songwriting, like they're good, like the songs, the idea, it's really good. The track Always in My Head, for example, it's a nice tune, it's a nice melody. A Sky Full of Stars is a fucking amazing song. True Love is a song that I really enjoy. Magic is a song that I really enjoy. But the problem is that they feel so skinny and boneless. So while I do enjoy quite a few of the tracks in this album, especially A Sky Full of Stars and Magic, I also believe that, you know, the album is just not an interesting experience. Actually, this is I'm pretty sure this is the album I've heard less from Coldplay because there's not really a reason why I would go back to this album. You know, every single Coldplay album up to this point had something interesting to offer, was a unique experience, and it was a solid album. Instead, with this one, it barely feels like an album. It's almost like a rushed mixtape. So that, you know, because of the lack of production, because of the lack of I think development when it comes to Heartbreak, I'm putting this album into D row. Heartbreak is a really interesting concept, and it has led to a lot of the greatest albums and lyrical concepts ever. But honestly, I don't know what happened in this album. Even though Chris Martin is a fucking genius when it comes to writing music, he didn't really do a good job with this one. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in the D row. Now let's go with A Head Full of Dreams. A lot of people hate this fucking album. A lot of people think this is the point where Coldplay went a little bit too much pop music, but honestly, I'm going to disagree. I like a fair share of the songs in this album. I do think that the album kind of overdoes it a little bit, or especially in tracks like Army of One and the horrible Fun. That track is fucking hideous. I don't want to listen to Coldplay ever again doing a song with Tough Lou in that sort of tune. Like, no, please don't do it ever again. But Adventure of a Lifetime, Hymn for the Weekend, the title track, Birds, Up and Up. It's filled with amazing songs. I really do enjoy this album. And unlike Ghost Stories, this every single one of these songs feel complete. It feels full. It feels like, you know, it was an actual album instead of just being a mixtape. It feels like the whole band created a project. Yes, again, you have the typical Birds and Universe and Love lyrical themes. Like, you don't have the heartbreak themes that you had on Ghost Stories that were obviously a little bit more interesting. But the music, the melodies, the production, everything in this album sounds fresh, sounds good. And even though it's not an outstanding album and it's not, best album of 2016 or anything like that, I do believe that it's a really, really good project. Every time that I listen to this album again, I end up liking it a little bit more, except for that little hidden track, X Marks the Spot. That song is pretty bad, but overall, I do think this album is really enjoyable. I do like, especially the production, and the instrumentals in this record. I think they're really, really nice and really enjoyable. So yeah, I don't think it's an amazing album or anything like that. So I'm not gonna put it in the S row, and I'm definitely not gonna put it in the A row. But I'm gonna put it proudly in the B row. I think this album gets a little bit too much hate, and I think this album it's underrated. Honestly, I think it's an underrated album. Now let's go with Everyday Life. Now, Everyday Life, a lot of people again hate this project. A lot of people think this is one of the most unpolished records Coldplay has ever released. But I disagree. I personally think that this is one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting, Coldplay album ever, because it has a lot of different styles. The band was not afraid to try new things, and after Music of the Spheres, I learned to love this album even more. You have tracks like Arabesque, where most of it is not even the band singing. It's a bunch of horns and trumpets doing one of the most epic solos ever in a Coldplay track. I love that track. I do think that this whole "we have the same blood" thing is a little bit forced. I don't think the lyrics are all that great, but who gives a fuck about the lyrics when you have such a great instrumental? Tracks like Guns, even though I fucking hate every time that Coldplay gets political, are really interesting. I really like the rawness in Chris Martin's voice. I fucking love Orphans. I know that a lot of people don't like the woo woo thing, but I don't mind it, honestly. I think it's kind of fun. Also, the track Church is really good. I do believe that the Arabic thing at the end of it, it's not really all that appealing. Champion of the World, it's a beautiful track, but I don't really think the album needed that track. The same thing with the track Daddy. It's a good track, but it's so weird, like it's so out of place inside the album, so I do think the album has its flaws. But then again, tracks like When I Need a Friend, which is one of the most beautiful tracks Coldplay has ever done. I love that track with my whole heart. I do think it's one of the best tracks from the album. You don't have any amazing tracks in the record. I don't think this is the album you should go to find the best Coldplay tracks, but the overall experience when you put it all together is really good. I do really enjoy this album. And I think that, this album, it's more than the sum of its parts. I think that if you really want to enjoy this album as much as I did, you kind of need to disconnect from this idea that, it's a Coldplay album. You're going to find a lot of anthems. Like, you have an anthem for every Coldplay album. For example, in Parachute is Yellow, in A Rush of Blood to the Head is A Scientist, in X and Y Fix You, in Viva la Vida is Viva la Vida, and Mylo Xyloto is Paradise, in Ghost Stories is A Sky Full of Stars, in A Head Full of Dreams is Adventure of a Lifetime or Him for the Weekend. Instead, in this album, you don't really have a standout track, but that's okay. That's what I've been asking for. So yeah, I definitely do love this album. I'm not gonna put this album in the S category. I don't think it's that good, but it's definitely an A category for me. I do love this album. Alright, and now let's go with the last one, Music of the Spheres. This is the most recent album by Coldplay, and it's one of the biggest disappointments I've had in my time as a reviewer. Honestly, the expectations, the hype for this album was so great. I remember, being on YouTube, listening to all of these channels, kind of predicting what the album's going to be like. We had Higher Power, which is a really good track if you ask me. I do really enjoy that one. We also had Human Heart, which was interesting at least. I don't think it was that great, but it kind of showed, like, I felt like it was going to be a really good interlude, and it kind of is. So it was like the whole concept, this whole space concept that Coldplay was playing, I thought that it meant that for once Coldplay was trying to focus a little bit more in making a cohesive album rather than just putting out a bunch of hits. But that's not what happened at all. Actually, this is one of the most disjointed and, uncohesive albums that Coldplay has ever released, and I fucking hate it. There are a few tracks that I can say that I like. Again, Coloratura, I think it's a good track, although I don't think it's the amazing progressive song that everyone thinks it is. Like, it's not progressive rock. If you think this track is progressive rock just because it's like 10 minutes long, that doesn't really mean anything. It's just a really long ballad. I think the rest of it is just a bunch of bad decisions after the other. The lyrics are so obnoxious, man. Like the track Let Somebody Go. Selena Gomez, I don't have anything against her. I'm not a fan of her music, but I don't really have a problem with her. But, her contribution to that fucking track was so bad. The first review I made of this album was so positive, and I said, yeah, the tracks may not be that great, but at least they're enjoyable, and I gave the album a 7, which, if you've seen my videos, you know that that's a really big fucking rating. But, every time I've heard the album again, I was like, shit, there's nothing memorable or just fucking, that sticks with you in this album, which is the reason why, honestly, this is going to the lowest tier by far. I just don't like this album at all. I don't like this album at all. So yeah, I'm honestly feeling really good about this tier. So we have Music of the Spheres on the E row, which is fair, honestly. I wouldn't put it any higher. We have Ghost Stories in the D row, which again, I think it's fair. I wouldn't put this album any higher either. We have Mylo Xyloto in the C row, which seems kind of harsh, but I just feel like for every good track you get on that album, you get a bad track, which is not really good when you're talking about a full listen. On the B row, we have X and Y and A Head Full of Dreams. It's kind of weird seeing those albums together, but yeah, I think it's fair too. Then we have Parachutes and Everyday Life on the A row, which again seems like a weird duo, but I think it makes sense. Obviously, Parachutes has better songs, but I think that Everyday Life, it's a more interesting listen, so I think that kind of, compensates. And then we have A Rush of Blood to the Head and Viva la Vida on the S row, which honestly, fucking perfect for me. I do think those two are the best examples of Coldplay at their peak. So yeah, I'm feeling really good about this fucking tier list. I'm gonna finish it up right now because for some fucking reason my phone is telling me that I didn't have enough storage. But yeah, if you guys agree with my ranking, leave it down below in the comments. And if you disagree and you want to leave your own ranking, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments too. I want to see what you guys think about each Coldplay album, so go ahead and give it a go. By the way, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. Once again, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.